but this is the first book I'm writing about. I have work edited and written and books which on history of Singapore women that I work with, Robin Stienberg, right? And I have also edited and written books about civil society activism. But this is the first time I wasn't going to write a memoir actually. I was going to write a cookbook. and then some things happened in my life, and I needed time to reflect and time to find out what was happening to my life and how did I get where I got to, because lots of things that I had, like being in civil society activism, surprised me, amazed me, because I'm really quite I'm not a very brave person, and so I needed to write and explain to myself. That's one reason, explaining to myself how I arrived at this stage in my life. Another reason, and a very good reason, because which is what drives me in civil society activism, is that we need alternative histories.
Sorry if I didn't, but I'm sorry I'm late. That was a great entrance. That's a wonderful entrance. Look forward to getting to the... Sorry, let's go.
We know that we do need alternative histories, and because we are conditioned and constructed in a certain way, and we have to, the next generation and the current generation have to know that there are other ways of looking at things, there are other histories, and it's our responsibility as Singaporeans to write those histories from our perspective. And fiction writers do that too, autobiographies do that too, but increasingly I think we do need more histories, you know, because histories tell you something quite different from official histories, you know. And we know about, like for instance, if you remember the book, the series, this is going back, I mean, it defines my period. Series like Roots, for instance. Do you remember Roots?
Yes.
And I didn't know, you don't know what Roots is, do you?
I've heard of it.
You heard of it? But you know, when in the 1970s, when it's a series, TV series came.
I don't.
You won't, you're too young, you're not born. The series, I mean, the first time I was hearing the history of slavery, you know, and so there are so many histories, biographies and autobiographies and fiction, from where we really learn different truths, you know, and so when we are writing ourselves, we are in search of truth. And so that's what I was trying to do. And so in fact, this is a gift to the younger generation of Singaporeans, my writing. I had them actually consciously in mind when I was writing this. Because all of us, we are all second generation, third generation, fourth generation, with the exception of these Penakans. Singaporeans, you know, and so we never discuss, we don't discuss our history. We will never talk about our history, you know. We don't talk to our parents and find out how was life like to them. Now when I think about it, I was thinking, they must have had really, really tough times, you know. When I was writing this book, I had never talked to my parents about their life. and how they came to be. They both met in Klang and got married in Klang and came to Singapore and settled down in Singapore. But I didn't know their history. I didn't know about my grandparents. I didn't know about what their background was, you know. And so I needed to find out, and most of what I have written is from Googling, and from talking to relatives about, because some of those towns that they lived in had very old history, so you can find that in. So for me, this whole thing was, I was writing many layers, and there was a thread to it. My life is the thread. And I also wanted to, and Singapore is another thread, but I also wanted to see how we were affected. I was trying to connect what happened in politics and what happened to us individually and our social group or our particular community, and relating it to public policies and the politics of Singapore, at the same time relating it to the wider world, or history of what is happening elsewhere, whether it's Vietnam, China, Europe, whatever, you know. So I was trying to link all that and then put Singapore in the context, you know, when, for instance, the 1960s youth revolution, the yuppie generation, the hippies, the flower generation,
What's a yuppie?
Yuppie, what's a yuppie? Young.
Like you. Sorry.
So flower people, and so on and so on. And what was happening in Singapore? Anybody? We were told to cut our hair, keep our hair short.
Yeah, we are told to be just the opposite.
Just the opposite.
Instead of
We were
long
out
hair,
of the context of history. Historically, we were being forced to do something very opposite to what everybody else in the world was doing. You know, they were finding freedom, liberation, thinking, different ways of looking at things, different. And here we were being subjected to a very rigid system. So those are the connections that I was trying to make, you know. And so it is a gift to young people, your generation, to know what we had gone through and how Singapore has become what it is. A lot of it we are very proud of, a lot of it we are not so proud of, you know. And so I have recorded from my perspective. So the generation I'm talking about, like for instance my grandmother grew up in a village and didn't know anything except her life in a village, you know. She got married, moved house, and lived in that house till she died. Had children there, and everything was done there, you know. And then her children emigrated to Malaya and Singapore. And then my generation, and see how different, what transformation, dramatic transformation has happened, because there was my grandmother who didn't know anything. The British Empire came and went, and she wouldn't have experienced that at all, you know. And here I am experiencing, in my lifetime, in the last 50 years, so many changes in our lives, you know, and how it has affected as people, as individuals, which is what I was trying to figure out for myself. How do we, and it's not been easy, you know, it has not been, who am I? What is my culture? How is that culture defined? Do I have a value system which is personal to me, that is conditioned or influenced by 3, 4, 5, 6 generations of my people? And how has that been affected by being in Singapore, you know? So, which is what I was trying to trace. And of course Singapore is so unique Singapore, because the transformation and the changes have been so dramatic. For one thing, it's a perpetual construction site. And 30 years ago, I remember thinking, will this ever settle down so I can see my city? You know, settle down.
I get it. I really get it.
Yeah. So let me read some part of the story I have. This is, I've taken from the epilogue. And it also tells you something about the different experiences I had growing up in Singapore. And I begin with William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, the nature poet of the Romantic period, speaks to me as no other poet does. A lover of all that we behold in this green earth, the mountains, the meadows, and the woods, he recognizes in nature and the language of the senses the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral beings. His words have seeped into my soul since I was first introduced to his poetry during my higher school certificate days, and has remained there. His poems of surpassing beauty, deep melancholy, and the inevitability of loss, as well as his focus on the potential of the ordinary to be transmuted into beautiful poetry, have a particular significance for me, since I too am a lover of nature. I too experience the inevitability, I need to reward. Inevitability of loss, and find comfort in what remains behind. To be a Singaporean is to move on, trying and sometimes failing to keep up with the changes. As Kathleen Norris observed in her book, The Cloister Walk, to attach oneself to place is to surrender to it and suffer with it. This country, with its seemingly infinite resources, is forever on the move, demolishing and building and rebuilding over and over again. Streams become canals and reverts back again to being a stream. Waterways disappear underground. The physical geography is rewritten many times over. What a roller coaster life it has been in Singapore for those of my generation. I cannot keep up with the many changes, the discontinuity in the past, nor can I understand the rationale for it. This part I'm going to read. Those of you in the library service, I was reading, I was in a panel discussion in the last Writers' Festival, and the moderator was the director of National Library, and he said he cried many times in many sections that he read, and then he read this out, and you cried, and I cried.
It's okay, Robin.
What remains for me are the memories of people, places, and events, memories of dreams fulfilled or never realized, of fragile moments of happiness and joy. Even at this moment in my long life, I find difficult to sort through the many threads of my life. The Indian, the Singapore Indian, the wife, the widow, the feminist, the Catholic, the woman that I have been and the woman that I am now, to identify a coherent meaning and purpose. Perhaps I should not even try, since I'm not prepared to exclude any part of my heritage. In his book of essays, Imaginary Homelands, Salman Rushdie speaks for all when he says that our identity is at once plural and partial. Of migrant and displaced minority groups, he says that sometimes we feel that we straddle two cultures. At other times that we fall between two stools. This gives us a double kind of perspective, he says, because we are at one and at the same time insiders and outsiders in this society. The late Singapore playwright Ho Fao Poon reinforced this idea in an interview given in 1996 when he talks of being a marginal person. That kind of marginality, a fringe kind of existence, allows one to compare and reflect. Because you don't belong to any one of those times, you know. Sometimes you feel a sort of unique kind of loneliness because you're just different. But then you also feel good because you are able to dialogue, to talk, to communicate with every unique group of people who think differently and have different experiences. I understand these sentiments, being both insider and outsider, being a marginal person, experiencing a unique kind of loneliness. These are times, and there are times when joy is experienced too due to this marginal location. In my own civil society community of NGOs, I am a happy insider, where we dream together of a more caring and gracious society, where race, color, sexual orientation, and social class are irrelevant. Only the humanity of the individual matters here, and I belong. Some days when I need to lift my spirits, I drive down one of my favorite stretches of Upper Thompson Road, which is bordered by greenery, lush with ferns, and sheltered by yellow frame trees, and go into Upper Pierce Reservoir. Looking at the sun streaming down the various shades of green is a delightful experience. One evening, not in the best of moods, and soon after I stepped down from the Airway Expo in April 2009, I took this drive to Salita Reservoir. I was alone. The usual stream of walkers and joggers had left to avoid a threatening storm. I picked a bench overlooking the water, which was dark and grey, reflecting the brooding sky above that was heavy with low-hanging clouds, sit and observe the approaching storm. I watched as it slowly and relentlessly moved towards me. The darkness and the heaviness of the clouds reflected my mood perfectly. It's not often that one can watch a vast space of open sky in overbuilt Singapore. So this moment was exceptional, awesome, and sacred. The rain threatened to fall any minute, and I hoped it would fall and drench me. On a late spring day in 2011, I was in Margaret River at the holiday home of one of my sisters. I sat outside, surrounded by hundreds of age-old trees. The spirit of age, of wisdom whispered in the winds, put me in a calm and serene mood. I was inspired and filled with clarity and quiet confidence. In the morning, the birds come to my window. Their chirping summoned me. I got up and watched them. I got my camera, but these blue wrens, small and energetic, never stopped moving. I would watch these wrens with delight every time I come here. I used to watch them on the far side of the paddock in the campus in Monash, all those years ago at lunchtime in Melbourne, eating my sandwiches under the trees while they darted hither and thither around me. I am delighted to have the privilege of such magical moments. I would like to be a blue wren in my next life, I think. What is it about trees, birds, the ocean, sunset and sunrise, and open spaces that captivates me? Is it the sense of freedom and expansiveness that nature inspires, which is in such short measure in Singapore? I'm most truly myself, most at peace and most content here among the greenery of nature and the blue expanse of water and sky. But now, as I write this, I'm in my little flat, 9 stories above the ground, hemmed in by other blocks of flats just like mine. But there is a sunbird hovering near my window, and over the plants I have positioned along the corridor. It is truly a lovely distraction, making me move from my computer to watch as it darts from plant to plant. In a flash, it takes off. But I know it will come again tomorrow at the same time. It always does. That, at least, is predictable. That's my last sentence. I spared you the history and the politics, but it's there.
So, We're open to you.
Yeah.
Read us something from your young days.
From what?
Younger days.
Younger days.
Oh, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know the young.
You know, my younger days, again I'm going to reveal my age. I come from
Your age. Yeah.
I come from the pre-war generation.
Okay, don't believe us.
So when I was 5 years old, my mother took me and my siblings to India. My father was still here, my uncle and aunt, they were all here. They went through the Japanese occupation.
I like that part very much. In India.
And so I grew up in a village.
How long were you there?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah. So my first language, I don't know what my first language was when I was here. But there was Malayalam. That was a language there. English was the second language. And then when I came back here at the age of 11, I think, I had to go to school. There were lots of kids who had missed school during the Japanese occupation. And then I had to learn English. And my parents
At
thought...
11.
Amazing. And my parents thought, now I'm monolingual and I'm just English. I thought of my Malayalam. I used to be able to read and write and be very literate, you know, because I went to primary school and I was in secondary school when we moved back here. And the first thing my parents did, they thought to get us to do English was to send for assimilation. Put us in the convent boarding school. And this is after the occupation, mind you, after the Japanese occupation, war years, the years when even butter was rationed and everything was rationed, you know. And I grew up in the village where everything was available. I mean, fresh milk from the cow and, you know, apple for breakfast and putu for breakfast and chicken you can just take from the farm and have it. And here I come and I'm sent to the boarding. You know, and the breakfast is bread. I had never eaten bread, and you know, and then banana, the small banana, and I don't eat banana, it is discolored. These bananas were discolored. So, but we can't leave anything on the plate. So I used to smuggle the banana in a handkerchief and put it in my pocket and even I wish I had thrown away, but there were no bins around, you know. And at weekend, we all had to carry our laundry and go to the washroom to wash our clothes, you see. And this handkerchief with the rotten banana fell out.
Gosh.
The seniors who were behind me picked it up and gave it to me, and I wish I had the whole the floor had opened up and I could have, because they would have thought, what was in banana? What was in that handkerchief?
My God, she must have been really
But we lost so much weight because we couldn't eat the stuff. After 3 months, my parents took us back home and got ourselves a tutor to teach us English. Yeah. So that's how our English education started. And I have great love for the language. You know, it's amazing you pick it up so late in life. And but the other thing that I can't remember, which I couldn't write about, is the difficulties we must have faced in that first year in the convent, in the school. I can't remember. So it must have been a very unhappy, traumatic period. Can you imagine, you know, coming from a village and going into this convent? And the nuns, you know, I mean, I've never seen nuns before in my life. I come from a
very
very
good black and white habit.
That's
So they look like penguins.
Penguins,
Yeah, so scary. I remember I
base, you know, this conical, whatever, have it, you know, in black, and inside is white scalp covered entirely, and the whole thing is black, you know. And of course I had not seen a white person before in the village, so there were these strange creatures, something I didn't write about in my book because I couldn't imagine that. I suppose maybe I must have blocked it out completely. Another thing that I blocked out completely was when we left Singapore, we were on a boat. We come from South India, we were on a boat. The boat couldn't dock in Madras, the current Chennai, because of some. Every time you make an announcement, then you wonder, have you crossed the line? Because we never know when you cross a line. You know?
Yes. See, but I don't think this can happen today because just last week I had lunch with Kenneth Sang, one of the detainees, and we were discussing things that had happened then and things which we had known. And he said to me, he says, look, today you can't make 10 people disappear overnight. The internet will be ablaze with it. In those days, I'll tell you what happened. Kenneth is a friend of mine. A few others are people I know. And another one was a journalist called Peter Ong, but that was before, that was back in 1970. You can just grab a fellow, he disappears off the streets. Straits Times, as Chong Ip Seng will tell you, was under quite strict government control, what you can publish, what you can't publish. So somebody disappears, and there were no handphones, there was no Twitter. You don't call everybody every day. You disappear for weeks, for months, and nobody knows that you're gone. And it was a fact of life in those days. Today, it cannot happen. It cannot happen. That's what many of them felt. Or that's Kenneth's opinion. That I can't just disappear tomorrow without someone knowing about it.
Do you know how many Malays have Muslims have disappeared? Since 2000 and since 7/11.
9/11.
9/11.
Now I ask you, are they prominent? Do they have websites? Are they prominent in the public?
It doesn't matter. They are people, Singapore citizens.
So it all depends on how noisy you are. I mean, like if you are a prominent government critic, I mean, it's all they cannot disappear tomorrow overnight.
So that means an ordinary citizen can disappear.
Yes.
And nobody would say anything. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, people often tell me that I'm too well known for them to arrest me. And also, I think I'm too old. But to go back to, yes, you were asking something.
How much do you need to trust? Like, what are the boundaries of trust for things to get done? Because if you don't trust, things don't happen.
That's the problem. That's a problem, you know, the lack of trust. At every level, we don't trust. We don't trust each other, we don't trust our neighbors, we don't trust, it has come down. And that's one of the things that have disappeared, the trust, you know, and which is really quite sad part of the.
But Constance, you don't see it like trust re-emerging again among us. You see that?
I think what's happened now, this is why Aware, for instance, organizations such as Aware, clubs and festivals, the Writers' Festival, you meet and you get to know people and you begin to trust each other. You know, when you're not part of a community, you're not part of, you're living your separate lives, and we do live separate lives because we work practically 7 days a week and 16-hour days, and You don't have time to have boyfriends and girlfriends and get married and have children. There's no time, you know. You don't have time, and then you work 16 hours, you don't have the energy. So, so we just go on, work, you know. This generation, my generation was the luckier generation, I think. We had more time. And we could still own houses. And we have time for boyfriends and girlfriends and socializing and getting married and having children. I feel
To form groups that think and question and wrote and read poetry.
That's right, yes.
You know, we had time for that.
We had time, you know.
So what we're saying is that you have to make that time, right? Beyond work and family and getting married and all that, to look at the community as a kind of a fabric. And then you get to talk, I mean, at groups like that, to know what other people are thinking, you know. Yeah.
What I'm hearing here is actually, I mean, in case some of you may think that this is a government bashing session. I don't think it is, and I don't believe Constance meant it that way, you know.
No.
I think what I'm hearing here from people here is that this cry for community, cry for a group of people, for people to be able to come together again as a community, to work with one another on the issues that matter to their hearts, without being, curtailed or parameters put onto you in any way. You know, this feeling of trust and so on in each other, it comes about only when there is community, and that's something that I think
the government senses this. That's why we started Conversation Singapore. You know, to get people talking. You know.
Since it's not government bashing session, I won't comment.
No, but I'm trying to look at it. They could have said something and you get that, you know. But you go beyond this.
But also, I think that the focus to develop, to grow, to create a buzz, that it's so easy for any one of us to do that, you know. When you focus on something and that's the focus, that's your job description, you forget. Yeah, you forget other things. Let me read this part for you.
Be more concerned on the brain issues.
I mourn the loss of independent spaces for community bonding. One such place was the 30-year-old Seletar village at the bottom of Seletar Hills. A gathering place for many of the neighborhood's old and young residents, where the market, the hawker center, the shops and the banks had served as a center for routine business, shopping and eating. It was also an area for just sitting around and gossiping. This place was for me an important space during the most settled, secure phase of my adult life. Seletar Hills was the home of my parents, my sister and her family, my brother and his family. The village had been a happy gathering place for the community, where people formed relationships and developed a sense of neighborliness. Perhaps also boyfriends met girlfriends and girlfriends met boyfriends. A stall in the hawker center sold the crispiest peanut pancake. It would seem that suddenly somebody sitting in a main planning office somewhere, clueless about the importance of community spaces, decided to demolish it. I wonder at the lifespan of places in Singapore and why independent, organically evolved communities are not allowed to flourish. What is the rationale to destroy them? Is the interest of the community ever given consideration, or the politics and economics trump every time? Who makes these decisions? I'll tell you what's happened, and it's got to do with the decision was made. People in Seletar Hills protested. They held meetings with the minister and they complained because it was a place where it gave the whole estate a sense of community, because you knew each other, you met there. But they knocked it down, and first, and as usual, they usually leave it empty for several years, and then they rebuilt it into a very expensive shopping center. And lots of nice places like sit there, really, and no market, supermarkets and everything. And they were trying to develop that whole area because this thing that is stuck in our planet's heads to make Singapore trendy, modern, and so that you forget that people are involved, that they forget that this is what makes us human, these kind of interactions. This is what makes us loyal. This is what makes us patriotic. This is what makes us committed to our country. These kind of bondings,
Yeah, but society is so fast changing with the influx of foreign workers coming in. This sense of gotong royong and kampung spirit is dying away.
which is, so I don't know what I'm saying in my book, but as I talk, I get these revelations and epiphanies. I think we have to stop thinking of Singapore as a nation, as a country. It's a global city. And we, the younger generation, will be moving on. They won't consider this a whole. They will move on because their education, the experience, they can find jobs elsewhere. And so we have more immigrants will come in, and Singapore would have lost its unique identity. Yeah. And we can't mourn that loss, because that is the nature of things, I think.
Oh, that makes me want to cry.
But doesn't the government say that we're not making enough babies? No.
We have no time to make babies.
Can I ask you on that point, in that whether shrinking population is a liability or is it not? Now, you're finding, though everybody keeps on claiming that, we must have a growing population, a vibrant population, you'll find that Japanese economists say that actually a shrinking population and aging population is not really an issue, because who is this for the benefit of? Are you talking about growing the economy? Are you talking about the quality of life of the existing people? For people of our generation, a growing economy, increased GDP, is not necessarily desirable because prices go up, there's inflation. Whereas a stagnant economy, where with stable pricing, stable cost, is more beneficial to us, and we don't need more immigrants, and we can have our space. So I'll ask you this question: are more babies a necessity?
You ask a question and you're not paying attention.
I'm asking you that question. Someone from the new generation. Do you need more people?
Then do we also need more condos?
Yeah, no, that's the biggest point. You study the economy first. Well, and the person who has been debating this with me, Professor Pang Eng Tong, you want to know who he is? He was the Dean of Economics at NUS before he retired, my classmate, okay? You need more condos, then you need the price to go up, then you need more people to buy the condos. If you don't have babies, then who's going to buy a condo? If you already have a condo, and so you got to bring in the immigrant to buy the condo so the developer can make some money.
Then why do they just don't build condos?
But you see, that's why things go downhill when a few good people keep quiet. Evil wins when good people keep quiet. Not that.
I think we are putting it a bit simplistically.
Yeah.
Because I think in terms of new people coming in,
Yes.
I have a certain bias.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those new people who came in when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult to adjust to society. and to get true blue Singaporeans to accept people like me. Okay? Now everybody sees me as a Singapore writer. Okay? But it took years. What I think we are saying is that the erasure of familiar landmarks, something that connects us to the spirit of the land, you know, nature, as Constance started with, the trees that I grew up with as a child, that comfort us and all that. And suddenly, some unknown bureaucrat somewhere decided that these trees should go, or this building, or this library, or whatever should go. And that contained the invisible treasures and memories and lives of people. And once we take away the invisible treasures, then we are so much poorer, despite having a spanking new shopping mall. And that's what we are saying, you know. And your point about, you know, too many immigrants or whatever, and that's because in the last few years, the people making the decision did not think properly about the infrastructure and prepared for more people to come in. They just did the numbers and the money and the dollars, and they did not think about the impact on our social lives, you know. And the spirituality connected with that. If we go back to Wordsworth, there is a spirituality in us that needs this connection to the earth, to the sky, to the patch of sky that we are familiar with. And that is poetry of the soul, which the government and the bureaucrat and the URA cannot understand. And that's what we are trying to say.
Sorry not to agree here, Ari. They understand fully because we've gone through the sums. And the sums add up that since salaries are pegged to GDP and the year-end bonuses is pegged to GDP, they have got to jack the figures up. And therefore, they understand fully what is in their interest. But let me close at this point. This is not a PAP bashing session, so let's move on to something else.
We're talking about spirituality and connection. I agree with that because I've been staying in Canada for 2 years. And Canadians are really spiritual people. And everything is connected to nature, and you find the way their life is lived. And seriously, honestly, when I left Singapore for Canada, I didn't want to come back at all. It's like, you know, if I had to, I was ready to go there, and you know, if I could get my PR, and you know, I just lost the connection with the country. It's not that, you know, it's just the way the whole. I totally felt there was no quality of life. I had to pull my daughter out of school to homeschool her so that she could be educated in Canada in the university, which Singapore wouldn't accept her. I felt like I was left out. You know, we were literally pushed out from our zones. Like, you know, it is something that.
So what made you come back?
I had to sell my money. I ran out of tuition fees. She's got 3 more semesters to do, but I can't sell my flat right now because they put a block on it to say that I can only sell to Indians and blah blah blah. So I'm stuck. So I'm looking for work right now to save enough money to go back and school her. So you know, this is the thing. I mean, seriously, I mean, we are losing a lot of talent. Okay, because when I was there, I was able to write a book. I've got a novel which I've written 6 chapters already, which I think, you know, quality of life. And I came here as like shopping center. My daughter was I'm sorry, it's not government passion. It's just like, you know, you feel so lost. I mean, the country that you were born in. You know, you don't feel any connection. It's such a sad thing, right? I mean, it's like, I have to go somewhere else to find that connection with a different country where I'm actually an outsider, you know, and I have to work hard to be accepted there. So there are a lot of issues here, you know, we go through.
You're right, of course they know. But their goal is different from our goal.
It's a different choice.
Mm.
Well, Okay, I think we have to probably end now because I mean it's been a very exciting session. But what we could do is that we have